guys for being here. First, I'm very happy to see so many of the global folks. For those who don't know me, I'm Dumet Abisab. I'm the guy who did the picture. And this is Daniel, my friend, from the Global Fund, and this is how this whole friendship started.
Hello.
Quelqu'un parle anglais? Vous parlez tous anglais? Je fais un mélange des deux. Ok, je fais un mélange. En arabe, donc voilà, en arabe, oui. Je vais essayer un petit peu en arabe. Donc, merci beaucoup d'être là. Thank you very much for being here. After 23 years in the UN, 9 of them were these guys here, and 5 years in the private sector in Lebanon and Geneva, I came back to my roots and worked a lot with Lebanon. And I spent like 3-4 times a year going to Beirut. And one day I received a phone call because I think exactly a year, 365 days ago, the 21st of October, I received a call from Daniel. We say, hey, where are you? And I say, I'm in Beirut. She said, I'm in Beirut too. And this is how, in October, we were there, both of us, accidentally. And then we went and had a visit of Beirut. We went to the mountains, to the top of this, cedar forest in Beirut, in Lebanon, in the Shuf. And we have three guys from the Shuf here, I guess today. Rania, Sami, Osi, Shuf, okay, there's that one. And then we went back to the city. And there, in the evening, Daniel met my father. My father is 91 years old. And he used to work when he was at WHO as part of the board for years. And then he started talking to Daniel and then telling him about Lebanon, about Geneva, about the history of Lebanon and Beirut. And suddenly he goes home. In the evening he sends me a poem. And I said, oh my God, he represented so well the cedars and my father and our roots. And I told him, let's have a book. Let's write that book. That's photography and your poems. I was really, and we walked for 2-3 days in Lebanon, I would say, between Beirut and other places, and we came with that book.
So thank you, and it is great to see so many people from different lives. We want to go with you on a journey, a new journey, I think, for Dumit and myself. One foot in Geneva, but just that other foot into Lebanon and Beirut today. And it's going to start with these photos. So you've got these, for me, wonderful photos from Dumit. And you see a little bit in Dumit's look. You see that behind it, he can capture that at the moment, but there's a lot more behind it. When you spend time with him in Beirut, you see a lot more meaning. And that's what I try and do in these poems, is just bring out those photos and bring out a little bit that look that you see in Dumit's eyes. And then the second thing is to go onto this journey to a place. So instead of, taking a guidebook and going to these places in Beirut, it is to see what a place can do to you when you talk to some of the people, where you go into the streets, you go into the mountains. And I actually used to teach some of this when I was teaching in Cambridge. That inside you, people often say you have history, you have time, and a place is something outside. But I actually think we all have these maps inside us that are our identity. And a little bit when you go around Beirut, you start to unravel this map, which I think we try and show in this book. And that really is the bare roots, the roots that are behind some of those places, those people which you can't ignore when you go into Lebanon. So we'll go in straight away. Let's go to the first one. Is just Wi-Fi, which is a beautiful photo from I think from Dumit. This kind of smouldering elemental landscape up in the mountains where you start. You're not in the streets of Beirut. If you imagine, I'm traveling there with my kids, and my kids have always got these bloody iPhones where they're looking at them, looking for connection, but there's no connection really in those places. You're beyond it. So this is called Wi-Fi. In the middle of nowhere, on a mountaintop, we arrive at a chapel as lonely as a rock. I look at my phone. searching a connection, and there is a single Wi-Fi reception directly up to God. So that is a little bit, hopefully, what a place can start to do for you when you're in those places.
We haven't rehearsed, but we're very good at improvising. I will be also explaining a bit about why those pictures. For those of you who know Lebanon a bit, this is one of the oldest castles on the seashore of Lebanon. It's from my home city, Batroun. That castle was on the 25 lira. For those who remember the lira at that time, it has lots of value. 25 lira used to be... 25 lira used to be 25 francs, yeah? It's now like 20 cents or 25 cents. So this is a place in that city of Batroun where you can only get a connection directly up to God.
So the second one is Poetry Safari. So we had some very nice comments from people on the book, and one of us accused us of being flânerie poétique. And that really was the spirit of the book, which it comes from the Boulevard of Paris, where instead of going with your guidebook and trying to see what you can do to a town, you see what the town does to you. You have that kind of curious openness to engagement in places, and that really is the story of how we did it. And we hope people use that book. I mean, I would like to see people in places reading a poem rather than looking at a postcard or snapping a photo. So this is the story of how we did it. So Poetry Safari, it's called. We had known each other for 15 years as friends and colleagues, but never as a photographer and a poet. Then one week, 365 days ago, we found ourselves in Beirut, by chance, by fate, and discovered a new path along the city streets, a new side of each other. I met Doumit's father, who opened its history. I saw Lebanese cedars, which taught me of presence and of its roots. I saw the ancient churches, sculpted from rock, like a soul. I met the hermits, who taught me of silence and words and poems which are written inside us. And we walked the streets of Beirut, which are never the same, each time you take them, always giving anew. We discovered past, talking to Eddie the jeweler, who was there every day for 40 years and had seen it all. And to the woman hanging from her balcony like a climbing rose, who was too old to love any mortal, but declared her love to her daily lover, Beirut, Beirut. And she declared her luck that while so many had lost their lives, God had wanted a more beautiful girl than her to kill. So we went on an afternoon safari of photographs and poetry, armed with a camera and notes on a phone, to try to lay bare something new of ourselves, something of this city, its streets, its people, to write and to shoot, uncover in a few moments Beirut's bare roots. So the next one, so that's a little bit how it happened, and it was in a few days. We did this flânerie with he would have liked me to have a BlackBerry, because he was always a BlackBerry. It was actually an iPhone. And we took photos and met people and tried to capture the moments. The other thing we tried to do was put bits of Geneva and Beirut together. And actually one of the photos I was trying to, which is a beautiful photo of his, is one, the jet d'eau, and then these masts in Geneva. And we were looking at, the photo we put next to it with these cranes. And we were looking for a symbol of Beirut, and in these reflections between the poems, we came up with cranes and spires of one of the symbols of Beirut, not the cross, not the minaret. So this is cranes and spires. Cranes are the spires of Beirut, its cathedrals, minarets. They reach up with their slender necks to the heavens. Beirut religion is rebuilding, regeneration, reincarnation. You can knock it down, blow it up, take it apart, but you cannot stop Beirut building, reinventing itself. Its cranes shoot up like they are tied to the very heavens. Their long fingers pull up their nation in its continual miracle of reincarnation. So it was a strange image of Geneva, somehow went into Beirut, but I think captured that religion, which for me is that rebuilding, reincarnation, which makes it one of the oldest, but also one of the newest cities. So the next one. So it's also, when you do this flânerie, when you try and open yourself up to a place, it's the people you meet. So this was just an afternoon, and this was a woman we met, and she very kindly gave us her permission to use the photo. But we were literally walking on the streets. There's a beautiful photo next to it, actually, of this old, slightly damaged street with graffiti and bullet holes over it. And she was on a balcony, and she just looked down, and she started talking to us as they do on the streets of Beirut. And she opened up something of the city to us. So this is a poem about her. She leans out of the balcony like a climbing rose on the back streets of Beirut in her Chanel dress. I was young here, I married here, I had my child here, I am a grandmother here, I will die here, she says, like she's speaking to Beirut, like to her lover. Life is sweet in Lebanon, just to be alive to feel each day. Shells have fallen around me, you can see them in the street. In my very house, snipers have shot my neighbors, but I have survived. And that is enough for me to sit here, satisfied and alive on my balcony. She looks down at us like a tumbling rose, her look full of thorns and flowers falling from her balcony. God wanted a more beautiful girl to kill than me.
So I went back to get her, okay. Two things I found about her. Her name is Rose. I never told you that. Her name is Rose. And then the second thing I learned about her, that she used to work with my uncle in Beirut like 50 years ago in the downtown of Beirut in a city called Alambi Street, for those of you who remembers Beirut with the old streets. And she knew me completely. Rose is her name. Okay, this one I will do. This guy sits there on that corner, never asking for anything, every day. He could be, at the end we even thought he was a spy or a Syrian guy, we don't know. But he had this look in his eyes. So I told the story, showed a picture to Daniel, who came with this. And this is called Beirut Beggar. He is the beggar who never asks you for money. He just sits beside the path with his long Beirut beard, curly as Beirut streets, freckled with white, like the wind on the waves of the Beirut coasts. Lush like the vegetation, filling in the cracks, the exploded holes in the city, like a tumbling beard which always grows back. I just cut it this morning. And when you give, his eyes rise up to you, lightening up your night like the moon, and it's not clear who has given to whom. And the funny thing is that this lady, well, it's not, even though I said Beirut, it's a bit of, this lady sits there also in a different city, the opposite to Beirut, in Saida again. And she sits there every day. I asked about her, maybe I could see her again, and it seems that this person sits there, like the other guy in Beirut, that same place, same position, kind of every day. And one day, overnight, she was there this time, you saw her? You see, this is my picture. So these are Beirut beggars. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is walking with Dumit. You see his camera flashing, but you also see his eyes, and you see a lot of the history of a person when you walk the streets, even for a couple of days. And this one's called Streets of the Past. It's got that beautiful photo of looking back out to the sea. I follow the curves of the streets of Beirut with a good friend who was in the militia. We pass antique shops, we pass the steps, bars, all washed in traffic. Cars appear from nowhere like bullets. I still think I can see in his inner eye the trap around each corner. Every street has a sniper line of sight. He shows me that here they used to stack up the containers one on top of another so children could slide home in their cover safely from school in the evening unseen. He now walks casually through these streets, his eyes at ease, shooting only with a camera. But before, he would come home from work, take off his tie, and go out for a second work to protect the streets, the corners, the lines of sight, protect his community. And now, as we wander the same streets of modern Beirut, his outer and inner eyes do not always see the same paths with his camera. He still searches lines of cover in the streets of the past.
Yeah. I was walking in Geneva with Daniel, showing him where the containers were stacked. And Daniel was walking behind me with his, I can't pronounce the word iPhone, I'm sorry, with his device and taking notes.
Flatly 2.0.
And then when he wrote this poem, honestly, every time I see or read this poem, it kind of gets into me. I don't know how he managed to write it this way, but it talks a lot about many of us in Beirut who used to live like during 18 years, going back each night or after work or not going to work, walking behind containers on the streets to avoid snipers. And when I read his poem, I said, oh my God, I wish I can write like you.
But it's also finding a little bit of Doomit in the place. So the next one, I mean, the Middle East itself for me is special for many reasons, but it's this place where all the gods of the world came to live together, and we see some of the results of it. But this one really, you see it in Beirut. It's part of its beauty, it's part of its tragedy, and this one is really who built Beirut. The Phoenicians built Beirut, the Romans too, the Christians built Beirut, the Muslims too, the Jew built Beirut, and the Druze built it too. The Middle East is the one place on earth where, willing or not, they all made it together. Flawed, bullet-holed, but beautiful in its diversity. The Middle East is this middle place between heaven and earth. It is not Muslim, it is not Christian or Jew. The Middle East is this crossroads, this living together. It is where the gods of many religions came to live on earth. It is their origin, it is their root, it is why God built Beirut.
And this is an old Phoenician port in, again, Batroun city, where they used to build like boats and stuff to discover the world. They even went to Australia, no? And when you see how Beirut is now, again with cranes and continuous building, you understand why maybe I put those two pictures together. You need to see the book, by the way, that is on sale somewhere. When you see those two pages open together, you see this picture of building boats with the cranes or these things, and then Beirut being rebuilt and rebuilt.
And so this one is, you're also faced with the rocks, and this is the rock of Al Rouge. It was for actually my Ada who asked me to do it, and it's kind of what's remained in the middle of this town after everything has been destroyed and rebuilt, as you were saying. So it's called Bare Rock. The stones stand here amongst all our rubble. They're bare rocks resistant to our history, to our clocks. They watched Adonis grace these stores in the arms of Aphrodite, bleed like the sunset before the coming night. The rocks watched the flowerings of our culture, brief like an anemone, before its petals in the winds were gone. The bare rock watched as we fought our wars, as we turned rivers red, from sunrise to sunset the sea waves bled. The rock of Al Rouge has watched our lives, lapping like the sea, will be rubble for all to see. We live and love, we lay families and roots, we build Beirut in blocks, yet what remains persists are these bare rocks. You should go to that place. Hopefully, read a poem. We would like people to use the book, go to a place, read a poem instead of looking at a postcard or taking your iPhone photo and try and get beneath the surface.
I call this picture, by the way, UN Blue. Yeah? Does it remind you of the UN Blue?
Blue or blues?
Blues or blue. I don't have a blues. I'm done. So this picture, in fact, indeed, it could be in ATCL in Beirut. Yeah, Shadi? So, we were having lunch with the Swiss ambassador to Beirut, the ex-one, François Barras, yesterday. Chez Sami, the best Lebanese restaurant. We were having lunch there, and he was telling us about also the similarities, thank you. The similarities between those two cities, and I discovered that this guy who'd been twice the ambassador to Swiss, to Beirut, which is unusual to be twice in the same country, knew Lebanon and Beirut much better than I did, so I was kind of, and I was surprised to see Daniel and him having a discussion about Beirut. I said, oh my God, I'm just eating the fattoush.
Okay, this was called Even Geneva. On the ground, Lebanon is squeezed in between two neighbors, Syria and Israel, and the tides of the sea. But from Mount Lebanon, from the wind and skies, from the canopy, the summit of the cedar, Lebanon borders the whole world. The cedar of Lebanon looks to New York, Paris, Casablanca, Dubai, London, and even Geneva. It looks to the sky. 4 hours in the sky, and you're freely in or out of place, or like the wind you live, or like Dumit, you live in between, always checked in. Geneva and Beirut are like the hot and cold of their ancient thought. Ginger to cucumber, cherry to pear, walnuts to pomegranate. Geneva and Beirut keep you in balance of peace and noise, rules and chaos, mountains and skyscrapers, sun and November. Yet beneath the surface, they both have had their civil wars, religious conflicts, persecutions, and rebirths. Beirut and Geneva are closer than one thinks. But, for the moment, to many Lebanese, they provide the balance, the hot and cold, through which Beirut borders the whole world. So it's when you walk, you feel underneath you these roots. So Beirut stands there. It's got this amazing present, this knife-edge excitement about the present. Resplendent in its present, its intense moments form a canopy, a present above you like a cedar, which shades you from the burning sun of its past. As you walk its streets, those streets where your path is never the same, where you are always discovering, you see a second tree beneath your feet, Beirut roots. How do we follow the never-ending story of its streets, take its photo, write Beirut a poem when under our feet, under its streets, beneath its moments, we walk on tangled Beirut's bare